Welcome to the podcast, where we clear up common misconceptions in biology and evolution.
And learn that all the answers to evolution's mysteries are simple in the way that everything is astoundingly complicated.
Welcome to Darwin's Black Book.
Welcome to episode 14 of Darwin's Black Book. My name is Tom Land, a zoologist and professional researcher.
And I'm Rebecca White, and I'm a PhD student in evolution and genetics at the University of Exeter.
This week, it's a little bit of a different one, actually. We have some follow-up questions to do with primate evolution from actually the previous episode, brought to us by a listener, as well as some news. First of all, we should probably address the questions. Last week, we were talking about primate missing links. Not just primate missing links, but all missing links. I focused heavily on primates. And one of our astute listeners realised that we didn't quite define when one species becomes another species.
There's a good reason why we didn't define that.
Because it's hard. So thank you very much, Jen, actually, for posting these questions to us. There's another one as well I'll cover in a bit. But Becca, did you want to have a stab at this one?
Yeah, absolutely. So the actual question I have here is, at what point does something become a new species in the process of evolution? Now, what you are touching on here is something called the species concept. And this has been a talking point amongst both life scientists and philosophers for many, many years. And it's still ongoing now.
Hundreds of years.
I even myself know some people who have done their undergraduate dissertations, both in philosophy and in biology, on what is a species, what are this category that we call a new species. And I guess that's the first problem, the fact we're trying to put it in a category when it's a gradual process. But the official definition, again, this definition does have some exceptions, is when two individuals can no longer interbreed to produce fertile offspring. So they're so different physically and genetically and everything that they cannot produce babies that can then go on to have babies. They are now different species.
I was going to say, this is, yeah. So an example of this would be if you crossed a tiger with a lion. You get, if the...
A liger. A
liger. If the lion was male, or if the tiger was male, you'd get a tyan, or something along those lines. But the point is, they are not genetically viable. They cannot produce young themselves.
They're sterile hybrids.
They are sterile hybrids. But if
there are definitely exceptions.
An example of which, if you go to North America and you have a look at the polar bears, they're gradually moving south. As conditions warm up, they are looking for more food, as sea ice can no longer provide them with the diet that they've had for the past several thousand years. They are now moving into the territory of brown bears, and the brown bears are mating with them, and you're getting a hybrid between a brown bear and a polar bear. The grizzly bears, because they're called pizzly bears, which I think is quite sweet.
Wow.
Pizzly bears. But they are viable. They are able to reproduce. So yeah, technically they're two different species. Polar bears are some of the oldest bears in the world, aside from pandas. So yeah.
Yeah, there's also a concept called ring species, where this is where lots of species kind of geographically live near each other, say 5 or 6 species, that kind of makes a big circle. And species that are next to each other in this circle can interbreed and produce offspring. But if you go across the circle, they can't interbreed.
Yeah.
But they're still distinct species.
Let's say you have species A at the top, species B is on the right-hand side, C is at the bottom, and D is on the left-hand side, like a compass points. So what this circle basically is, A can breed with the ones to its left and right, wherever they are on the islands, but it can't breed with C down at the bottom.
people are still talking about it, still trying to categorize this, but this might be something that cannot be categorized in the way us humans like to do.
Yeah, we like to put things in boxes. We really, really do like a defined line of this is one species, this is another species, and sometimes that line is more of a smear and a gradient, which is really, really hard to define.
And so that's kind of the main concept of why this is a hard question to answer. So I also want to mention last year, when things were still in person, I went to a talk at the University of Exeter eGenis seminars. And these seminars are basically mainly about the philosophy behind the life sciences. And there was a talk by Dr. John Dupre, who's quite a big name in this. And his talk was fascinating. It was about the idea of phylogenetic trees. So if you don't know what that is, it's just a fancy word for the tree of life. It's what Charles Darwin had in On the Origin, where he wrote, I think, and then sketched one out. So you have the root at the bottom, and then that all splits up into different species as they evolve.
Yeah.
So he was looking at this and said the species concept, of course, has its issues. And he said the tree should not stop at what we call a species. It should continue to every individual. So the ends of the trees, the ends of the branches, don't stop at a species, because within species everything has natural variation. Like obviously we're the same species, you and me, Tom, but I'm a bit different from you.
True.
So he said that maybe trees should stop at the individual. Of course, practically that's going to be extremely difficult and really annoying when it comes to our kind of research. But it is very interesting to consider individual variation as a whole thing on its own. And that was a really interesting point of view. I did come away from it thinking that's really interesting, but to what end? Like, is that really going to help our research? But I do understand his point, definitely.
I think that's really interesting, like hybridization as well, and in looking into that, because I know there's a lot of Europeans with some Homo neanderthalensis DNA.
I do. I had my genome sequence. I've got like 2.85%, I think, of Neanderthal
DNA, which is different species, Homo sapiens, Homo neanderthalensis. But there was some interbreeding there, and again, most of Europe has got a bit of it in their DNA. So that's another prime example of where maybe looking at the individual is better than looking at the species.
Maybe. Cool. So a question that came in that you want to take this one, don't you, Tom?
Yep. Also from Jen. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Jen. It says a lot of vegans. Okay, that's a good start.
Yeah, that's a great start, isn't it? I think a lot of people.
Well, I mean, yeah. Okay, so before we say this, I am vegan and I do not say this. A lot of vegans who like to use the suggestion that our teeth, predominantly the lack of huge canines and the ability to grind food with molars, are proof that we shouldn't or aren't designed to eat meat. Ultimately, what attributes have we gained or retained through human evolution that could be used to support and dispute the suggestion that humans should be vegetarian? Like at first we're omnivores.
Yep.
I mean, I'm not, but we evolved into omnivores.
We are omnivores. We've evolved into omnivores. However, there is a lot of people who suggest that maybe we are not as inclined to eat meat and we're more on the vegetarian side of things than actual true omnivores. Also, just want to touch on one teeny little thing. We aren't designed.
That's very true.
That's just me being picky, though, isn't it?
So it isn't a personal attack on Jen.
No, absolutely not. No, it's really, really interesting because I think that actually highlights, as a sidetrack, very briefly, highlights quite a lot of things. I've heard a lot in questions and talks and also books saying how we are designed for a specific way of life. We are designed for a specific diet. And I think they're prevalent throughout, I would say, the non-evolution strict biological community. It's just one of those things that language have picked up. But if you look at it, design suggests that there is a designer, and that ain't how evolution works as such. Because
I mean, our teeth are clearly good enough to eat meat because people eat meat. So
yeah, absolutely.
I mean, it might not be like the perfect air quotes design for doing so, but like it's possible. So therefore,
yeah, absolutely. Because finishing that one as well, because natural selection has no end goal. I just want to say that there is no end goal to it. Natural selection shapes an organism to maximise its success in a specific environment through the process of evolution. But yeah, so in terms of the dentary structure and diet, there's a lot of factors here, and it's kind of basically my thesis for my master's.
Oh no!
Here we go. A few episodes ago, I did say it's like, but that's for another episode. This is that episode. Welcome. So we're taught from quite a young age that canines equals meat eating, and big molars are specifically for herbivorous. And I would say if you look at megafauna, elephants, huge molars, and they've only got a mouthful of them, then yeah, it's true. Tigers, also true. But when you get into smaller adaptable mammals, that's where it gets interesting, because the lines are not so clearly cut. It's a lot more... Well, it's a lot more in the middle, in the grey area, in terms of what they eat. Well, let's start at the beginning at 50 million years ago. Welcome to another primate evolution episode. Oh, Becca looks thrilled. So,
you can keep it within the time limit, right?
Oh, absolutely, 100%. Fine, let's do this.
I believe in you.
So, primates are, I think they're just a fantastic example of looking at this. And if you start 50 million years ago at the small, really kind of proto monkeys up in the trees, they are foliage and leaf eating, as well as insect eating. They have a mouthful of really sharp little fangs, much like bats have today, in fact, to grab and eat insects. They then supplemented that with more and more leaves up in the trees. Leaves are not great in terms of nutritional value. They've got the young leaves, lots of protein, lots of sugar, but as soon as it kind of hits the point of the leaf unfurls, then you've got an indigestible...
Cellulose, right? That's what they
can't
can't
trapped in
digest.
cellulose. Yes, you need specific enzymes to break that down. So then you move on to primarily leaf eating about 45 million years ago. But from the 45 million year mark to 20 million years, maybe 15 million years even, you see a lot of changes occurring in the anatomy of the primate. So you shift from wandering around in trees to jumping around in trees, which is really interesting. And
what time is this, sorry? 45 million?
It's about 40, yeah. So the journey I'm going to take, there's no real dates I have for you, but it's between 45 and 15 million years.
Oh, wow, okay. Quite big.
Quite a big jump, 30 million years. But what we see is a shift to, jumping around in the tops of canopies, from wandering around. That's because the diet shifts from primarily leaves to primarily fruit. Fruit are incredibly energy rich, lots of sugars in there. Gives a lot of energy to do things like processing visual information. Visual information is incredibly important if you want to jump across branches, because you need to judge distance. And that's because your eyes are moving together. Each field of view in your eye will be converging and being able to allow you to judge distance.
Oh, the 3D image.
The 3D image, exactly.
Two eyes overlapping.
Exactly, the eyes are overlapping. And the V1, the visual cortex, which is at the back of your heads, this is a region which started to expand. We can see that. We can see it expanding in order to allow this enormous amount of visual processing to take place. Yeah, so from this... increasing in visual acuity, visual prowess, we're getting trichromatic vision as well. This is colour vision as we know it today. Red, green, blue cones, and you can create a colour image of your surroundings.
So you can recognise the fruit?
You can recognise fruit, and you can recognise the young, tastiest leaves as well. Also, you can determine... this fruit is lovely and red and shiny and looks so juicy and good, and then it will kill you, so don't eat that one.
I see, okay.
So now you can kind of stay away from those, go towards the ones that are healthy and sugary and wonderful. Also, this sees, because you're jumping from branch to branch, dexterity is increasing as well during this period. You're getting better at distance judging, you're getting better at noticing what food is good, and now you're getting better at dexterity. With your little fingers, your little monkey fingers, you can start picking out very specific bits and manipulating things with your hands.
So I don't know what else was around at this time eating things like fruit, but I can imagine if you then look at the evolution of these plants, they now have a whole new selection pressure, right? To try and evade these new